Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Thursday night, the 7th of February 2019, and winter is moving right along. And we've got a lot of current weather going on and some interesting weather developments as we move through the weekend and into next week. Weak weather system followed by a not so weak weather system in the Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe of next week. We'll get to that in just a second. Let me right off the bat, just because I could tell by reading some of the chat that's been going on before tonight's live stream started, try at your best not to get too worked up when looking at these snowfall forecast maps, especially after you go outside the 72-hour time frame. They are highly unreliable. They almost are never right, and they certainly are not going to be right with regards to any kind of specifics. So just hold that thought in your head as we go on later when we do the long-range part of the live stream. Also, a number of you have asked me over the last couple of months about maybe doing some instructional videos, and I actually did cut one this morning covering the sounding. I kept it short. It's, I think, about 7 or 8 minutes or so tops. But if you go on my YouTube channel, Joe Chaffee, and go to where I have the instructional video playlist, it will be the last entry. And my plan of attack is to do one again tomorrow, and it'll be one of the first things I do tomorrow. So this way I'll get it done and put it up. And I'm going to keep trying to do one a day or one every other day to cover different areas. As I said, today we did the sounding. I think tomorrow I'm going to talk about the surface map and how to read it and what that means, and then we'll start to do some upper air maps, and we'll do various other things as we go along. This way, when you're watching, at least when you start to see some of these maps, if they're not making sense to you, and it's quite understandable if they don't, if they're not making sense to you, the little instructional videos will certainly help to explain. And then when I bring them up, you'll say, "Oh, there it is. Now I get it," and that'll be a good thing. So watch out, be on guard for those videos coming up over the next several days. And Reverb points out that it was 8 minutes and 42 seconds. Okay, I guess from my standpoint, that's reasonable considering, we do 1 hour weather live streams here. Welcome tonight to those of you who are watching from my weather app, which you can download for free on Google Play or on the App Store. It works for all mobile devices, and it's absolutely free. One of the additions in the recent update was the adding of Zoom Radar, which allows you to pretty much center on any part of the country, zoom in as tight as you want. You can add all sorts of different parameters like temperatures, wind, warnings, watches, storm reports, etc., etc. So give it a try. It's absolutely free. You got nothing to lose, and you put in your location and you get your current weather conditions and your local National Weather Service forecast. Plus, you get all my posts that I do throughout the day, and you get notifications, and not only when the posts come up, but you get notifications that the live stream's up. You can watch the live stream right from the app. There's a video page. If you miss it, the most recent video, you can go to the app and pull it up. The Joe and Joe Show is on there as well. That usually gets put on the next morning. And for those of you who are thinking about maybe expanding your weather experience even further, and it's a great way, by the way, to support the app, the free app, for $2 a month. You can subscribe to my weather platform on Patreon, which expands weather coverage even further. If you're really into weather, or maybe you use weather in your business as far as making decisions about whether to do something on one day versus another, this would be for you. And it's only $2 a month to start, and you can find links for that on the app or on my website, and I'll also throw one in the chat a little bit later on. So let's get to tonight's live stream. Also, quick highs to those of you from my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee, Angry Ben's Angry Weather, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Storm Watch, and meteorologist Jeff Banson's Facebook page. So onward and upward we go. We'll start with tonight's watches and warnings, and it's still, pretty much a busy map here with this storm that is now running up through the northern Great Lakes. We still have a large area. Virtually the whole state of Wisconsin is under a winter storm warning, and so is a good chunk of the state of Minnesota. Either we've got winter storm warnings up there or blizzard warnings, which continue in the westernmost counties of Minnesota, down into southern Minnesota, and even into northwestern Iowa. Eastern, North, and South Dakota also continue to be under a blizzard warning. I think it's more at this point due to the wind and the blowing snow than the snow actually falling. The radar starting to tail off just a little bit. But going to the east, we also have a blizzard warning up for the part of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, with warnings for the rest of the Upper Peninsula and the northwestern part of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. Winter weather advisories surround all that. Flood watches in the Ohio Valley. There's some heavy rain going through there and on up into northwestern Pennsylvania. And out in the west, the new storm is coming in, and this is going to be starting the process of bringing two weather systems into the east, one on Sunday and another one that follows. That'll be the system that I'm sure everybody is talking about and maybe talking too much about for Tuesday. So we'll come back to all of that in a little while. Weather tonight is pretty active on the radars. We have a marginal risk of severe weather tonight in this small little box that's drawn in parts of central Kentucky and into southwestern Ohio. Otherwise, that's all encased inside a general area of thunderstorms. I've seen a couple of stray. I haven't really noticed whether there were any severe thunderstorm warnings that were put up today. Excuse me. Yesterday's severe weather was a bit more extensive, but it's kind of winding down now as we move this front to the east and things start to weaken in the atmosphere in order to support it. And here's the satellite loop tonight. Very active looking satellite, strong tropical feed of moisture running from just off the coast of Mexico, southern tip of Baja, across Mexico and into Texas. A little Gulf moisture getting involved there, and you can see toward the last few frames of the loop, you've got this narrow band of bright white cloud tops there. So that's where you're seeing that heavier rain and some thunderstorms. And of course, you've got the Great Lakes socked in with clouds. And south of, say, southern Virginia, where the weather was beautiful today, a beautiful warm February day, we've got north of there, we've been socked in, which is oh so typical for this time of year when you get a northeast wind. Any type of flow off that less than 40-degree ocean is always problematic. And we're starting to see energy coming into the west. And, of course, we've got those winter storm watches that are up for parts of the west, and including already some winter storm warnings. So on to the forecast here for the short range. And we will begin with, let's see what I had first. We have the snow. Okay, we'll start with the forecast snow amounts. And this is all in addition to whatever has fallen. So in the areas, say in the eastern Dakotas, where you've got these blizzard warnings up, only looking at another inch or two on top of the snow that has already fallen, but still some sizable snow amounts for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on the order of 10 to 15 inches in most places. And then you've got a general area of 3 to 6, 7 inches across the rest of the state of Wisconsin that's under a warning, and back over near the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. The snow that you see being indicated for southwestern New York and also for north central New York, that is going to be from some lake effect that will get underway tomorrow once the Great Lakes system clears the east with the cold front that goes by. And then as we get ready for the big snows in the west, as the Sierra Nevada is again going to get hit fairly hard with snow amounts in excess of 36 inches in some places between now and this is right up until 7 a.m. Sunday. We have also some heavier snows up through Northern California, in through interior parts of Nevada, but even some amounts being indicated for some low elevation area. I'm sorry, Oregon, my mistake. In Oregon, even some low elevation areas, probably going to see a little bit of snow out of this. And on up toward Washington State, got some numbers being put out there for places like Seattle and Tacoma. So that's something that doesn't happen all that often. Every once in a while you get the right pattern to bring snows into that area, and voila. So here are the 72-hour snowfall amounts. So all the action, remember the trough is in the west. So where do you see most of the snow? In the west. The deepest part of the trough is west of the Rockies, and where do you see the snow the furthest south? West of the Rockies. So it's been already pretty active in the Sierra Nevadas in the last 72 hours, and now we're going to be seeing more activity in the coming 72 hours. I guess in places where it snows on the order of feet per snowfall, and they put up only winter weather advisories for that, that's real snow. When we get bent out of shape sometimes for a couple of inches, this is the real deal out here. And also up through much of Utah and into Idaho and western Wyoming, some sizable snowfall there. To the west of Portland, it actually shows an inch here. When I put my cursor on Portland, it shows an inch of snow there. I'm going to have to double check those obs, and also some snow in and around the Seattle area. So that's something I want to look into a bit more specifically. Up in Maine, some additional snows in the last 72 hours. If I reduce this down to just a 24-hour snowfall, this has actually come in the last 24 hours, and this is what's fallen in the last 24 across South Dakota into eastern North Dakota and northern Minnesota. So there's the blizzard here, the blizzard warnings, 6 to 8 inches of snowfall, another couple of inches on top of that tonight as this winds down, if it hasn't done so already. And you've got strong winds blowing all the snow around, restricted visibilities. That pretty much accounts for it. The system, and let's bring up the latest map from 21Z, which is at 4 o'clock this afternoon. There's your low, pretty well wrapped up, less than 1,000 millibar low, fairly tight pressure gradient. You can see the temperatures across. It's hard to see on this map. I'll bring up the EDD in just a second so we can see the numbers a bit larger. But you're looking at teens, single digits, and below zero readings north and west of the low. And then ahead of it in the warm sector, look at these numbers here. You're talking about temperatures in the 70s and even the 80s with some juiced up dew points to some degree, at least in some areas, less so in others, with dew points in the upper 50s and low 60s, at least enough that it is triggering off showers and some thunderstorms, but not enough to make it severe. And of course in the northeast, you've got last night's low sitting southeast of Cape Cod and an onshore flow that just won't go away. It's got this warm front pinned into southern Virginia. So around the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, temperatures are in the low 50s. In southwest Virginia, temperatures were in the upper 70s. And here's how it looks at this moment now. So we're at 7 o'clock, 3 hours later. I think if you look at this map, here's an exercise for you folks. Can you find where the cold front is? Because it's pretty obvious. You've got this slew of temperatures in the 70s, and then suddenly, over a relatively short distance, you jump from one side of Mississippi to the other, and you go from 75 to 48, and then to Little Rock to 34, and then in northwestern Arkansas, we're looking at 19. So there's your cold front, and it looks like that front is probably somewhere running from, and I'm just guessing here, so let's say Cincinnati to east of Louisville, down through Nashville to about or just east of Jackson, and then maybe it's probably through Baton Rouge and out into the Gulf of Mexico. I would say it's past Houston and past Matagorda, Texas, and perhaps just kind of getting ready to swing down south through Corpus Christi. Brownsville at 75, but I would say the front hasn't gone through there yet. Florida, temperatures in the 70s, and then you come up into the Northeast. So look at the jump that you go from Virginia as the numbers populate. So we've cooled off into the upper 60s down in southern Virginia, but you don't have to really go too far, and you start to get into low and mid 50s, and then you got 40s and upper 30s. That, you know, this time of year and through the spring, if you're in the coastal Northeast, you know what I'm talking about. It's basically a snap of the finger that turns the wind onshore, and you can go from having a really nice day to a really miserable day in the spring months. And we had a perfectly damp and gloomy day here all day long after last night's rain. Just sat in the clouds all day. There's no mechanism really to get it out. And now we've got a cold front coming, so that'll be the next order of business for overnight into tomorrow morning. Radar tonight, and it's fairly active here. You've got this extensive area of showers. They are now actually clipping parts of my area, but the band narrows out. Some heavier downpours and probably a couple of thunderstorms here in the mix, or perhaps some blossoming thunderstorms. But we're not seeing any kind of widespread line or even clusters of thunderstorms. It's just kind of a narrowing band of showers as the support for severe weather is weakening now as the system is moving eastward. And up to the north, we've got some rain and showers into western New York, and that's moving northeastward. My area, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, the northern parts, the Hudson Valley, northwestern Connecticut, will get into some of this rain overnight. But to the south of that, I think showers will be few and far between. It's more going to be on the order of light rain, patchy light rain, drizzle, or fog that's around, and there might even be some locally dense patches of fog to deal with. Up in the cold air, where we've got the winter storm warnings, you can see the last of the accumulating snows now beginning to pull out of Wisconsin and on up under the upper peninsula of Michigan. So the upper support. The radar presentation here is actually pretty interesting because it's got that twist to it. So that's probably where you've got a nice little shortwave trough that's working on with all the dynamics that are present up here to produce some heavy bands of snow. The west is fairly quiet. We've got a little bit of activity in northern California, southern Oregon. Looks like some snow there on the radar, and perhaps a little bit of patchy activity as you go down to the south. But this is ahead of the weather system that is going to be coming in to the west. So on to the forecast map. We'll do the short range and take care of this, and then we're going to come back to the long range. There's a sneak peek at a week from now for you folks in the west. Another big event coming in there. The overall action in the west is going to be quite interesting over the next couple of weeks with the weather pattern the way it is, and that's a hint for later on. So here's your front in the east that is going to go through. More activity upstate and into northern New England. Looks like it's going to be rain all the way up to Maine, by the way, which you don't see too often. Now we do have that cold high coming in behind it, and that's going to spread out cold air into the east. Meanwhile, in comes energy from these Pacific systems to bring snow and some rain to California. The first of these, present here, has already run toward the east coast. So let me just back this up. Here's the energy that's coming in for Saturday. And a piece of that breaks away and rapidly moves eastward out into the plains on Sunday afternoon, and by Sunday evening it's over into western PA. It weakens as it moves eastward. Now this is something that is quite possible, that a lot of that snow could wind up getting left back west of the Appalachian Mountains, but even if it doesn't, it's a weak system here. We're not talking about some kind of strong system. This is the first of two. The second one, the energy from the second one, is coming into the Rockies at this point on Monday. And you also see the leftover frontal boundary, because there is really a cold front here that's coming through on Sunday night that is going to stall out across the Gulf states, and you're going to get a little overrunning precip and a little energy that comes out there. And this starts to set up the situation for Tuesday. But before that, here on Monday, you've got some snows up for the central and northern plains and up into the northern Rockies, and also more energy coming into the northwest, more snow. With that deep trough in the west, this is a prime time for places like Seattle, Tacoma, Portland to possibly see some accumulating snows out of this. How much remains to be seen. I don't really focus too strongly on the west most of the time, but probably going to pay even closer, more attention as we go forward with these weather systems. So let me come back to the screen for a moment. I'm going to set up the GFS, but I want to just kind of touch on something here. So we're pretty well done with the short range. Let's start talking about the long range. And we've already focused in the east with that system for Sunday, so now we're going to talk about the one for Tuesday. I want to go back to yesterday. I'm going to bring up the parallel GFS run from yesterday, because this apparently set everybody off the deep end last night. And it's very important to understand that after looking at this model over the last several weeks, it's been acting pretty strangely, and it's going to be well, let's just say having it become the operational GFS soon is going to be a problem if it keeps behaving this way, because it's just been doing a lot of weird things. And this is where you have to be really careful when you're looking at these maps point blank, and you're looking at something that is going to happen days from now. We all understand that models are going to flip around and move things around and jump around sometimes when you're out many days ahead, and then you hope that they start to narrow as you get closer. But I've been emphasizing, and I want to keep emphasizing, the fact that the more important thing is to really get a flavor for what the weather actually is doing, okay, and what is actually happening, because then you won't be too shocked as to what models ultimately wind up doing. So here's what the parallel GFS run did last night. I'll show you on the surface. It has everything, what appears to be anyway, everything suppressed pretty far to the south. Big strong high south of James Bay. You've got a primary low in Oklahoma, in eastern Oklahoma, that gets shoved to the east into northern Mississippi. Then that primary tries to go into western Kentucky. A secondary begins to develop along the Carolina coast, and as we move into Tuesday night, Wednesday, you got this big high pressing down with all this cold air, and suddenly you've got a ton of snow and sleet and freezing rain, with a deepening single low sitting at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay, and then eventually moving off to the Delaware coast, and then out slowly to the east. All right. This, in lieu of everything that is going on, this is a highly unlikely solution, and that was my immediate response from the get-go. I used slightly stronger words to describe that, but we want to keep this a family show. So let me go back and look at this from the standpoint of the upper air. When you look at the overall mean pattern, all right, you've got a trough out in the Rockies and out in the west. You have a ridge along the east coast. It's not a strong ridge, but it's the east coast is basically in a flat ridge position. This is not the kind of upper air pattern that is conducive to storms developing. And I just realized, by the way, I didn't even get to show you that parallel. My fault. I'm sorry. When I get moving maps around sometimes, I forget to do what I need to do. So let me run the parallel again. All right, so this was the parallel GFS from yesterday. Make sure I got the right one. And that was the 18Z from Wednesday. That's correct. So there's your storm system for today. So here's the one for Sunday night, Monday. Now you've got this frontal boundary that's left over, energy that from the west comes in. Low crosses Oklahoma to northern Mississippi. That's your primary low. Heading into western Kentucky, starts to weaken rapidly. Secondary low forms along the North Carolina coast to the mouth of Chesapeake Bay, off the Delaware coast and out. And then, of course, from here you logically go look at the snow maps, by the way, and they produce some really ridiculous numbers. But going back to what I was saying with respect to the upper air, trough is in the west, flat ridge in the east. You've got energy that's dropping down out of Canada that's going to keep the ridge flatter for a longer period of time. And I wonder whether that's what the model was responding to. I think what it did yesterday was it incorrectly took the southern part of this energy and just basically split it away from the rest of the trough. And you can see it here. It just splits away. The northern part of the trough lifts up, which is what it's going to want to do. And then it undercuts the ridge completely, strengthening as it goes by. That upper feature strengthens as it goes by to a deep cutoff low sitting somewhere in northern Virginia in the upper atmosphere. Now, look, if it wound up this way, yeah, you would probably be at risk for a pretty sizable snowstorm in the northern mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast. But guess what? It ain't going to wind up that way. I really find it very difficult to believe that this was going to be a viable solution. So a lot of folks got really excited about this. The snow lovers did. They got all worked up and excited over it. And you really just can't. Not at the stage that we were at, still 7 days away. We were still well into the point where models were going to be jumping things around all over the place. And indeed, that continued last night. And today, for the first time, starting to see models coalescing a little bit, coming into a bit better agreement in terms of how this is all going to wind up playing out for next week. I don't think this is going to be a big event, okay, for most areas with this lead low that's coming out, and I'll explain why. We're going to go to the the current map. By the way, I don't know if this is related. But since they ran the 0Z last night and then the 6Z run, and there's been, we're now 2 runs in a row where the parallel GFS run has not run. So I don't know whether they're having a problem or perhaps they made the parallel the new operational and they didn't tell anybody. I don't think so. I didn't get the memo if that's the case. So let's look at the late afternoon parallel GFS run, which was not really that different from the run before. And you are seeing the setup pretty much the same, where we've got this frontal boundary that stalls to the south, high builds up in southeastern Canada, and now you're seeing this southern energy come out. But where I think the parallel was completely wrong is where it, basically split off that trough and took the southern part of it and just undercut the ridge. You are going to have energy that's going to try and come eastward. There is also going to be the second piece of that northern trough is going to be present, and that's being reflected by that low you see in northwestern Illinois. But you also do have lower pressures down in Tennessee and lowering pressures along the North Carolina coast. So there's going to be some type of secondary low. If anything is going to wind up coming out of this as far as snowfall is concerned, it's going to have to maintain this idea where you have at least some sort of a weak lead system that comes out to the south off the Virginia coast someplace, and that creates an area of snow and sleet ahead to the north, being supported by that cold high that's still trying to hold on northwest of Maine. But you'll notice that the primary low is still quite viable here in Lake Michigan, at least the way this model is carrying it. If we wind up with this southern piece, this lead piece that comes out, you want it to kind of slide eastward. If that lead piece becomes weaker over time, then what you're going to be left with is the primary low that's going to cut to the Great Lakes and strengthen. And the ultimate result will be for most of the coastal Northeast, at least, it might be a brief round of snow at the start and then a change over to rain. If it looks more like this, then you could maybe be in a situation where you could wind up with a few or several inches or maybe a little bit more than that before you see a change over to sleet and then ultimately to rain before it ends. I kind of think that that's really how it's going to happen. further north, as you go into the interior, you're going to see higher snow amounts, a longer period before any changeover takes place, if it even changes at all. But again, that is the key here, is that you got to have that lead piece hold on and have some kind of strength. The option of the primary to secondary, sometimes you get these primaries, they just completely die out and the secondary completely takes over, which is kind of what the parallel GFS model run did last night. Given the fact that the trough is in the west the way it is, and that we have basically a ridge in the eastern part of the United States, that kind of argues against that happening. So I want to really, I think you really have to be careful here with regards to that, the idea of a strong secondary development. And if you look at the upper air, there's, unlike the parallel GFS where it broke off that southern energy, it doesn't do that here. It kind of keeps it somewhat phased with energy that's coming down in the into the northern plains. So you got this wrapped up upper low in northwestern Illinois. There's not a whole lot going on here on the upper air along the coast. You're getting some impact now from the energy swinging across the Great Lakes to the east. So you are going to see something identifiable there at the surface, which is what the model showed. But that ridge, you see how close that ridge is over there? That's a problem with respect to the secondary. So that's why I think if you start to see these models go crazy with the secondary, it might be doing that in error. Now, if we wind up with this upper air getting even more separated over time, and you see that upper low kind of further south and sort of sliding along, then we can have a different conversation with regards to the impact of the East Coast. Then we can sort of go back to that parallel GFS run to some degree. But I honestly, I think that is a very, very far-fetched solution given the way the whole atmosphere is set up at the moment. The European today was not that different really from the GFS. It kind of gets to the same place. It was maybe a little bit further to the northwest than where the GFS has it, but it sort of has the same idea. And when I looked at the profiles on the surface, it was a little bit warmer than the GFS, but not that much warmer. It produced about half the snow amounts that the GFS did, which I think was entirely reasonable, say along the lines of a 1 to 3, 3 to 6 inch snowfall, 1 to 3 for coastal areas, central and South Jersey southward, and maybe 3 to 6 as you go up a bit further to the north and west. But that was really about it. Again, this upper air is not an upper air that gets you excited for a big snowstorm for the coastal areas of the Northeast. Now, go upstate and up into northern New England and central New England and maybe even back into northwest PA. That's going to depend also on the low that's cutting back. So before I speak too much, let me double check this. But yeah, even there. Now see, here's the impact now of the primary low. See, that primary goes into almost west of Chicago. So that's going to drag warm air up into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and eventually also into western PA and into Ohio and maybe even to southernmost Michigan. If that coastal low's not there, if that coastal low is not there, that means the cutter low that's up in the Great Lakes is going to be the primary. That's going to strengthen further, and you're going to go back to the runs that you had yesterday and the day before, where you saw the models really strengthening that primary low in a big way. The European surface map matched up fairly well with the GFS. Let me get tighter so you can see this better. So there's your low off the Jersey coast. There's a low up there in northwest Michigan. Just back it up. I'm sorry, that's the GFS. Hold on one second. Let me line up the times correctly. So this is Tuesday morning. Primary low in northwestern Illinois. Bagged isobars down into Tennessee and northern Georgia. The European's got a closed isobar there in eastern Iowa, but it also has an identifiable low in eastern Kentucky and then you've got all these bad isobars along the North Carolina coast. That's Tuesday morning. And then by Wednesday morning, one low is already in southeastern Canada. Here's your coastal low, which by Wednesday morning is southeast of Cape Cod, and the precip is long gone. So you want to talk about terms of timing here. This is for, for many areas, it'll probably be from, say, Tuesday morning to Tuesday evening. Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, southern Pennsylvania, and then for everybody else, it'll probably be Tuesday afternoon into Tuesday during the early morning hours of Wednesday, and then it's done. So it's 8 to 12 hours. It comes in, it does what it's supposed to do, and then it's finished. So going forward now, it's a matter of watching these model runs to see them getting closer and closer, and if they hold on to this idea of that lead system that kind of comes out there off the coast to help enhance some snowfall here in coastal areas of the Northeast, and I would be shocked if it ever came out to start looking like the parallel GFS run did from yesterday. That would shock me quite a bit. All right, let's go a little longer long range and take a look at what's down the road, because the west is going to be busy again, just running back. Here's Friday and Saturday, and then here comes another system for early next week. Another stronger storm for the middle part. That's Wednesday, so some big rains into California and snows further inland. It just keeps on going. You've got this deep trough out in the west. It just doesn't stop. Here's the upper air. Trough after trough. I'll look at it this way, and then we'll widen it out. But it's trough after trough in the west. Whatever is in the east, they all wind up pulling out. And by the way, if you look at this on the time frame, this is for next weekend. Okay, this is for next weekend at this point. This upper air looks almost exactly like it does for Tuesday. So we may wind up with a repeat performance of what we're going to see on Tuesday. It may play out slightly differently, but the general rhyming is still there. And then that goes out. That ridge in the east just keeps wanting to kind of pop up there. And you've got this deep trough out in the west, one after another, system after system after system coming in. There's a little more troughing in the east as you get toward the end of the period, but we pointed out yesterday that this seems to be always the case on the GFS in every model run, where it ultimately tries to get to some kind of blocky look. It did it on the 12Z. It didn't do it on the 18Z. So however things play out, are playing out now through next week, look like they're going to play out the same way later next week and beyond. We're for the snow-starved, you're going to have to deal with whatever cards you're dealt with, and you take your chances. I don't know that we're going to wind up getting a whole lot out of this for the coastal areas that I forecast for. Inland areas may do a bit better as far as snowfall is concerned out of this, but if you're looking for the big one, this ain't it, okay? And the one that follows ain't it either. Not the way the upper air is set up. You got to get the trough in the right spot. You can't have a trough in the west and a ridge in the east and try to get a snowstorm out of it. You can get unusual things to happen, and that's how it'll probably play in some areas. But in terms of something of size, I just can't. I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening. Okay, so has Long Island ever had its heaviest heaviest storm of the winter season in November? Okay, good question. Let me just see if I can find this. Brookhaven Labs snow totals. I can tell you that, at least in my experience, in the 30 years I've been out here, I don't think that that's been the case. All right, so loading them up. Let me see if I could pull out year by year. So, All right, so at Brookhaven, which is east of me, I'm in central Long Island, and Brookhaven's about 15 miles east of me. So they actually measured 4.6 in November and 1 inch in January. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. I'll just try to find some year where November was significant. In 1995-96, which was their record winter, 90.8 for the whole season, 4.5 inches in November. You had 15.5 in December, 23.5 in January, 20 in February, 11.25 in March, and 16 in April. Okay, okie dokie. So what did they have last year for? I'm just looking. March they had 21. Islip I think had 35. So location means everything out on Long Island in both directions. Okay. In 89-90, 7.5 inches in November, and that was bright. I remember that. That was before. That was the Thanksgiving. Okay, that was the night before and Thanksgiving morning. That was from one storm. Then you had 2 in December, 3 in January, 6 in February, 5 in March, and 3 in April, for a seasonal total of 26.5. Okay, going back, let's go 72, 73. No, 3.8, 1. And this goes back to 1947. The answer to your question is no. There has never been a season where the heaviest snowfall, at least at Brookhaven Labs, if that represents Long Island, there's never been a season where we've seen that happen. Oh, Izzy D, thanks for hitting Super Chat. Scott Briller, thank you so much. You didn't have to do that because you're on the Patreon platform, but I appreciate it. That gets me a cigar on the way home. Thank you very much for hitting Super Chat, and I hope everything is good by you, Scott. You got stuff to deal with, so take a breather. And I hope you got to see the Joe and Joe show last night, because we talked about the blizzard of '78, because yesterday was the 41st anniversary. Exactly, Richard. I'm just being realistic. That is correct. This is this is not a winter where we've seen a lot. If we had seen a number of snow events along the way, even if we had just seen a few snow events along the way, I might approach this a bit differently. But given the kind of winter that we've had, and that we're still sitting here in my area and not having seen an inch of snow in one event since the November 15th snowfall, how am I, with any kind of confidence, going to wind up trying to forecast a significant snowfall for the coast? This is a year where it has not only not happened, it hasn't even tried to happen. Even the one time last month, that was a real stretch, and it became pretty clear as we got closer to the event that it was not going to happen. And that's something, by the way, we should pay attention to with this, because in the last couple of events, one of the things that's happened is that the GFS was really guilty of this, and so was the NAM. The models had the surface set up in a way that showed an ample amount of cold air. And then as we got closer and closer, it was a little less cold with every run. The 540, that rain snow 540 thickness line, wound up being further north, a little further north, a little further north. Okay? So today, for example, I noticed that from the 12Z to the 18Z, the 12Z GFS couldn't bring the 32-degree surface temperature above 32 north for New York City and Long Island, kept it under 32 for almost the whole event. The 18Z kind of came up a little bit. So we got to watch that, whether it winds up trending a little warmer as we get closer to this. And then you ultimately are sitting here and you hope that maybe you get 5 flakes at the start before it changes over to rain. Don't count that out, by the way. Don't count that out. Aiden Benjamin, I'm not a snow weenie, but I would love a storm with some meat on its ribs before the winter's out. This pattern is exceedingly redundant. Everything to the Great Lakes and you're falling asleep again. Unless, of course, Aiden, you're a snow lover from the Great Lakes, and then you're loving it. I mean, this pattern has been, has suddenly evolved into a bowling alley for that area of the country, and have a number of people that watch from that area, and they were on weeks ago saying, winter's over, winter's over, winter's over, and guess what? It ain't over till it's over. Simon Cowie, on the Worldview map, if you can please look over Georgia. Can you tell me what I see? The state of Georgia, not in Soviet, what they used to call the old Soviet Georgia. I'm assuming you mean U.S. Georgia. Sure. Hang on one second, and then Reaver, I'll get to your question in a minute. So, if I assume you're talking about the Southeast U.S., so we'll go back and bring up the short range here. In fact, you know what? I can even do one better. We'll get really tight. Maps, by the way, courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, a great website for all your weather needs. Your weather actually looks pretty decent. A little chill, cooler than what you were today, certainly, for the weekend. And looks like maybe some showers coming in for later Sunday night. The frontal boundary sets up north of you, so it's going to get warm again, and a lot's going to depend on how this coastal low comes out. But looks like Monday into Tuesday, as all of the stuff is transpiring in the east, and then low pressure eventually shifts to off the Carolina coast. Then you're going to have a front come through. And by the way, watch here on this map. You can actually see that. You see that low in southern Missouri as part of the primary, the bagged isobar that goes down into Mississippi and northern Alabama, and now we'll move into Georgia. There's your secondary low, right in that area where you see that the yellow and the brown and the red, the heavy rain reflection there on the GFS. That's where your secondary low is, and then it becomes even more obvious when you move it to eastern Virginia into Chesapeake Bay. So that is what how this stuff happens. Yeah, Reaver, it's a lot of it has to do with the fact that you got those mountains in the way, and low centers. They usually do one of two things. They either one will die out and a new one will form, or sometimes you'll have the primary kind of move along, and then suddenly the center will jump to the other side. So it happens. It can happen both ways. This way, it looks like the primary is going to hold on, and you get a secondary that reforms that comes up east of the Appalachian Mountains. The mountains have impact on this. The same kind of thing happens in the west when systems come into the west coast. You suddenly have the low takes a big jump over the Sierra Nevadas, and it comes out on the other side of the Rockies. Same idea. Timothy Veltman, thank you very much. You guys are very generous, and I appreciate that. And same for you. You're on the Patreon platform, so you don't have to do it. But thank you very much. It gets me 2 cigars for the rounding it all up to a round number. Thank you very much indeed. Johnny, did I make the map big enough? I'm sorry. Which map was I on? I'm rolling back through the chat from the bottom up. Oh, Peter. Okay. That was when I forgot to make it bigger. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I really am. Ruin Nation. Stranger things have gone down. I remember when one of the models called for back-to-back blizzard. Local Met says it doesn't happen, can't happen. Pattern doesn't allow it, and you had it. Okay, I would say to you this, all right? I have a feeling I know when that was. Either 2009, 2010, or 2010, 2011. Okay? But the pattern at least was conducive to that. There was a situation in one of those winters where there was a fairly big snowstorm that brought snows up to my area, and then a second one that came days away that actually passed just to the south and buried coastal and South Jersey, and in particular South Jersey, and down into Delaware, but my area didn't get to have both of them. That area to the south did. That, at least the pattern was conducive. We don't have that. In fact, we have just the opposite. Our pattern is conducive to have everything fall apart and not happen, and that's happened multiple times. So you got to wonder whether it's going to happen again. Check this link out about the new joint effort between NCAR and NOAA. Okay, I'm going to open it up, Timothy, and I'll take a look at it after partnering on new state-of-the-art U.S. modeling framework. Agreement paves ways for U.S. to accelerate use of weather and climate model improvements. Oh, well, that's novel. Maybe they can fix what they got. Yeah, it would be nice, I guess. I did happen to see somebody complaining about the fact that, how with the models being the way they've been lately, and that we need to spend more money on fixing the models. And I would just strongly suggest that the models aren't the problem. The problem are forecasters who no longer seem to see beyond what's on the models and trying not to, and they're not looking at the actual weather that's going on. Maybe that might help. Maybe that might help improve forecast accuracy, because you got too many people looking at models, and all of you point out what is an annoying running theme that I've seen over the past number of years is this sort of thing, and again, it's done without context. This sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, this model's got it going this way, and this model's got it going that way. Okay, and well, all right. So what does that tell me? I could, as I said, any of us can look at a model and map and say, yeah, this is going this way, that's going that way, and you're in the middle, so trying to figure out what kind of a forecast you're going to make. So what do? You wait for the next model to kind of do the work for you. And that's what you shouldn't do, and that's what a lot of forecasters, a lot of forecasters do these days. Not all, but a lot of them do, and it's problematic. So maybe if you could get beyond what the models are doing and figure out what the weather is that's actually going on, and then let the models come to you. That's something I've said a few times lately. You want to be able to make your forecast and have the models come to what you've observed, okay, and not the other way around. Phil P, thank you so much. I think I'll become an earthquake weenie instead. Okay. Somebody said today, there was an earthquake in California somewhere, a small one, but it came across on the Geological Survey report. I don't exactly remember where. Don't become an earthquake weenie, Phil P. Be a snow lover. I am. I'm a snow lover, and I admit it. And a lot of the times when I get aggravated, it really isn't. It really isn't so much at the actual snow weenies themselves, but it's more along the lines of those that when they look at these snow maps and they just kind of put them out there for everybody to see. They give no context. You folks on this channel understand what they mean, but most people don't, and most people aren't going to take the time to find out that, yeah, there's a problem with these maps, especially 6 or 7 days out, and it just makes the level of credibility go down, because now you're not only having to figure out the forecast, but you're having to fight all this PR that's beginning to circulate around that's against you, and you're wasting time. Oh, George Kazin on his vacation. Good to see you, pal. Awesome. You watched the soundings video. Good way to let me remind everybody that joined late. Okay, so you've asked for instructional videos. I've started doing them. The first one I did this morning. It's on my YouTube channel on the instructional videos playlist, and today I did soundings, and I pulled up a sounding and showed you what it looks like, what it means, and how to read it. It's pretty easy, and they come in handy so that we could look at different levels of the atmosphere in weather events, particularly in winter weather events. You sometimes can see warm layers in between that will tell you that, hey, maybe it's not going to be all snow. Maybe you're going to have sleet or freezing rain in all of this. Yeah, Reaver, you know what? Throwing those maps up doesn't do anybody any good. It really doesn't. They're basically drawn off what the model is forecasting for precip and whatever other algorithms that they use. And I'm sorry, they are certainly, you want to use them inside 72 hours. I think that's okay. All right. But when you're 6 days out and you're pulling up a map of 144 hours out in terms of total snowfall, stop. Just stop. It's pointless. The only way it's not pointless is if you show the map, and I've done this, if you show the map as a way of kind of saying, look, this is what the general area of accumulating snow is going to look like to some degree. It's going to be, in some places it might be too far north or too far south, but in terms of kind of giving a flavor of showing this is the part of the country that's probably going to get at least some accumulating snow over a certain time frame, then it's okay. But to pull a map up and then just show, numbers 6 and 7 days out of 20-inch plus snow amounts in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and Virginia is useless. And remember, the European in particular, I'm singling that model out because it's already done it like 5 or 6 times. If it shows anything in that day 7 to 9 time frame, the model has been absolutely horrible with it and should be ignored. Right now, we're no longer in the 7-day time frame. We're now getting inside the 5-day time frame. So we would like to think that they would be a bit more accurate. Peter Bicker, I would be very careful about the Madden-Julian oscillation going into phases 8 and 1. And I say that only because that is another thing that this winter so far, depending on which model you looked at, both the European and GFS have done this, where they showed that MJO going into phase 8 and 1, and it's never gotten there. And for those of you who don't know, the Madden-Julian oscillation basically is winds in the tropical Pacific and Indian Ocean. Especially toward the Indian Ocean, there's an oscillation that goes on that's related to the winds that are coming off the land in India and Asia from the mountains. And there are phases, and when the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation, there are 8 phases, and a 9th phase that's called the Circle of Death, which is kind of a neutral zone. But apparently, when the MJO is in that phase 8 and 1, it is usually good for cold and snow chances in the eastern part of the United States. The problem is, what it doesn't tell you is that it doesn't tell you exactly where those ridges are, doesn't tell you exactly where those troughs are. It's just a really broad statement. And again, I go back to what I said with the MJO just a minute ago. The models have kept forecasting that MJO to go into that favorable phase, and it's never gotten there. So again, let's be careful about that. Chad Crawford, you had a nice sunny afternoon in Georgia with temperatures in the 70s. Good. That is a good thing. Izzy D, I have a weather friend who is anti-models. He makes his forecast based off satellite, radar, surface maps, temps, and dew point and air pressure. Hey, if it works for him, that's great. I mean, I'd be curious as to how far out he goes with that. But you know what? That's kind of when I cut my teeth in weather in school and in the early part of my career, we had a couple of models that went out 3 days, and that was it. Okay, it was unbelievable when we went to an 84-hour upper air model. That was just like, oh my God, what an amazing advance in technology. Now you've got so much nonsense running around with all these models that people have really forgotten how to forecast. So it's nice to hear somebody doing the basics. They forget to look out the window, really. And someone, you're talking to somebody that, is using basics. And he says it goes out 3 weeks with satellite. I know some people that do that too, and it can be done. Good satellite analysis is really important. Unfortunately, I'm not too good at it. I do look, but it takes some time to gain an expertise on all this stuff. But yeah, you can do pretty well. If you know what you're doing, you can do pretty well. Scrub Aquila Fortnite, this storm taking shape next week resembles the storm we had in November. Well, at least from the standpoint, certainly, of the high pressing down from the north, from Quebec, with cold, low-level cold air. That's going to be a big, important player in all of this. In fact, in many ways, the atmosphere is actually colder than the situation that we had in November. So let's see. Let's see when we get there. We were at Thursday night. We've got till Tuesday to take a look at where the models take us from here and how they start to tighten up. So we know what we're looking for. Is there going to be a low that gets kicked out to the east, at least enough to keep that cutter, the primary low, from deepening too much too fast? If that's the case, you might get a halfway decent snowfall before it changes over and ends as some rain or drizzle. If not, the cutter takes over completely. You get a quick burst of snow at the beginning that lasts about a half an hour, and then it goes over to rain. And inland areas, maybe it snows a little longer. Maybe it snows for an hour or an hour and a half, and then it goes over to rain. New York Jets fan weather, February 7th, 78. Well, we talked about that yesterday. If you missed it, Joe and I reviewed it and pulled up the maps from that. So take a look at that. It's on the YouTube library with regards to yesterday. And yeah, we talked about the 50 inches down in Rhode Island. DeAndre Tillman, low-level cold air, modeled very poorly in the Poconos. Now that I do some work for folks down in Southeast PA, I've noticed that now head on. It does model that area terribly. Also doesn't do a good job in modeling cold air when it wedges down into the Carolinas, and we saw that with the early season snowstorm in December for the Mid-Atlantic states. Okay, so Dio, you're having some problems on the app. Message me and let me know what they are. Because if there are issues, I certainly would like to rectify them. All right, gotta go. So Scott Briller, Izzy D, Timothy Veltman, Philip P. Thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Again, for those of you who are interested in adding to your weather experience on a day-to-day basis, you can sign up for my weather platform on Patreon. We've got 225 folks on there. 226 people on the Patreon platform. It starts at $2 a month, and it's a great way for that $2. The live streams, the free app, which you can get on Google Play or on the App Store. So you got that. You got the free app. You've got the live streams I'm doing here, the stuff I'm doing on Facebook, plus on Patreon. You can message me at any time, and I will respond. So there's the Patreon link up there for you. Well, I'm sorry, that's the weather app. No, there's the Patreon I put up first, and now I got the weather app up there too. So, Mirtha Gunther, nice to see you. Robert Hurley, good to see you as always. Seth Dominus, tax to double $2 is a 24 on my schedule A. Got you, Seth Dominus. Very good. Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight at roughly 9:20, 9:25 Eastern Time. And tomorrow is Friday, so you might get another instructional video from me tomorrow. So look out for that. I'm going to try and do it in the morning and post it up and send out a notification to everyone. Have a great evening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's live stream. Good night, everybody.